Hi, everybody. This is the very first edition of the Jason and Sarah Show. On this very special podcast, we're going to be talking about a topic near and dear to both of our hearts, media bias. Recently, Sarah has written two outstanding pieces pointing out the conservative media bias at CNN. First, featuring Erick Erickson and his claim that Obama has perverted the Bible. And then comes Dana Loesch and her rant against pro-choicers. With that said, let's bring in Sarah right now. Sarah, the initial question I want to ask you, first of all, welcome to the program. The initial question I want to ask you is media bias real?
You betcha, Jason. It is real. I think that it was never so clear as it is now, and part of that reason is Fox News has been around pushing the boundaries further and further into complete propaganda, having sued for the right to lie, and we know all, the other, criminal investigations that they're under for their tactics. And now we have CNN, supposed to be a nonpartisan network. It's one of the third largest cable network, and what they went out and did was, in order to provide diverse points of view, they have hired a bunch of far right wingers and one Democratic political analyst from their latest hire. And so Erick Erickson was there before this batch was brought in, but he accused the president of perverting the word of God. And then we had Dana Loesch, who came out and called pro-choice women bigoted ageist.
Let's see, Sarah. You seem particularly offended by Erick Erickson's comments. What did you find so personally offensive and inflammatory about Erickson's rhetoric?
Well, I don't even, where do you start? He is talking about a sitting president when he said this. He's using religion as a weapon of destruction. The fact that anyone would speak of the president saying that they've perverted the word of God presumes quite an authority on God, doesn't it? It assumes that the person speaking has the right to make the judgment about what the word of God is. And to suggest, as the right wing has repeatedly before Barack Obama was elected, that he is not a Christian, not an American, etc. For Erick Erickson to then suggest that he has perverted the word of God is much deeper than even just his words. It's the implication that he is not a real Christian.
Well, Sarah, that's a very interesting point. Questioning Obama's Christianity, basically questioning Obama's legitimacy as an American, a Christian, and as the President of the United States of America. Bill O'Reilly did a really interesting interview today where he said that he was very proud of the way Fox News has changed the way Americans get their news and the way news networks function. Now, do you yourself personally think that the American media, mainstream media, has gotten its bias because of Fox News, or do you think that this is something that kind of happened with the political environment as well? Was it always this way, or is this a post 9/11 kind of change?
Well, I think it started when the rules were changed, which enabled Fox to operate the way it does. Then we have the internet. That creates quite a bubble. People go to sites that confirm their biases, their pre-existing biases, their beliefs, rather than, you're not getting straight news anymore. So I think it's a culmination of different factors, but if there's one entity that's behind it all, it would be Fox News. And it's interesting that Bill O'Reilly is proud of that because, the man is actually smart enough to know that he should be ashamed.
Well, so you would put this at the feet of Fox News that the rest of the media outlets are basically playing copycat, and you would say that this is the reason why the media has adopted a conservative bias. Would you put would you put the Bush era and the way the Bush people went after the media, the Bush administration? Would you think that factors somewhat into it?
Well, that's a really great point. I'm sure that does factor into it. I actually am not putting the blame for conservative bias on Fox. I think that issues have been framed in a conservative way for 40 years. And so the media has automatically fallen to that. And then you mentioned Bush. His administration framed things very well. They pushed back against the media. The narrative of the liberal media kind of took over then, and then you saw the establishments, the media establishments, kind of kowtowing to Republicans in order to placate them and get access. And Bush played that game very well.
Yes, he did. And there are a couple elements here that I feel we really ought to discuss. First of all, it's the corporatization of our media. And I think that's played a large role in the growing conservative bias. And I also think the purpose of our television media, and in some cases print media, the way that purpose has changed, the way news organizations are supposed to be profitable now, the way these organizations are supposed to entertain, they're supposed to pop the ratings, they're supposed to bring in the readers. They're not really meant to just be there as integrities and bastions of fair, factual information.
That's so true. One of the things I was thinking about when you started talking about this was having worked in Hollywood. There's always this thing, Hollywood is the corporations that run the studios are always copying the last success, and you see the same thing happening in the news. So is CNN copying Fox's success? Absolutely. Of course, that's not going to work. It never does, unless you have a franchise that you're pushing, but Fox is doing that themselves. And the other issue is that it's always the people who live in the bubble of the sort of elite media that does exist, but it isn't liberal. They are the last to know about changes. So you see the kind of people they push on America, the ideas, the framing is all very conservative. Their idea, let me back that up. It's their idea of middle America. You can kind of see this in the movies they make, where they think, oh, we want to do a down-home movie about somebody in Alabama and a TV show about this woman in Louisiana. And so they think they're going to appeal to the people who live there by kind of using that, what they interpret as down-home America, and co-opting it. But of course, if it's not genuine, you're never going to get that right. And what you see on TV and in those movies it may do a nod to those areas and the kinds of feelings that people have there, but anytime you end up generalizing like that, you end up with kind of a fake persona. And so I sort of think of that when I see the kinds of people that Fox News uses for anchor people, that sort of image, this perfect image. And CNN said that they were hiring some of these, like Erick Erickson, because he's from, quote, small town America.
I'm from a very small town here in America. A town so small, there's like 200 people in it roughly. Does this mean I have a future at CNN? Because my town's smaller than Erick Erickson's. But what it probably means is I don't have the right small town, quote-unquote, views that CNN was looking for.
Right, because, see, according to these folks, everybody in America is a conservative. And the only people they want to hear from are Tea Party type Christian, quote-unquote, conservatives.
Well, I mean, when you look at the corporatization of the media, along with this, where they think the money is, and who they think is going to bring in the revenue, I believe it paints a pretty compelling picture of what has exactly happened.
It's so
to
true.
Our system. Why people have to go to the internet to get their news.
It's so true. I mean, they're sort of chasing this dead model, if you will, and you put it so well because it's where they think it's going next. And they're so far behind the times. They're never caught up on it. I mean, look at, if I were in charge of a TV network, I would go after the Occupy movement, wouldn't you? I mean, here's a huge section of the population that has no voice. So wouldn't you give them a voice? Even if you're a corporate entity, there's nothing corporations like more than to make money off of the people who they're cheating, if you will. It's kind of a double win for them. So why wouldn't you go after them? It would make great TV.
Yeah, I deeply believe that our media structure has been so corrupted by corporate power and profit taking that there isn't an honest source of information out there that you can depend on, because anybody who works for a corporate media giant, one of the conglomerates, is basically going to have restrictions placed on them. Some may be broad, some may be narrow, but there's going to be specific restrictions. There's going to be certain things that they just do not want covered, do not want talked about, and no matter how open-minded or intelligent the host is, those opportunities are not going to be there. Which is why the internet and what we do at Politicus is so important.
I agree. It's just, coming up to another election cycle here, I really don't want to see a repeat of 2008. And so when I watch CNN bending over backwards, allowing these kind of hate mongers to have a voice and to legitimize that voice by giving them a prominent position on a very respected network, I'm very concerned. I mean, we remember 2008 and how Sarah Palin hid from the news, and many of the things that the Republicans were saying were not true. I mean, we can go back to John Kerry for that if we just want another recent example. And there needs to be, it doesn't need to be liberal or conservative, but there needs to be some kind of commitment to facts and to the truth, especially when you're talking about something as important as a presidential election, and an election where we're going to see who controls our House and the Senate, because these are our lives are at stake here. And in the meantime, the media is just looking for the big hit.
And if you want the perfect example of how the media can be so far behind, like the film industry, I think you should look no further than Sarah Palin. The media kept promoting her as a star 2 years after her shelf life had expired. Mm-hmm. They were 2 years behind on Palin.
Exactly.
They ignored her poll numbers. They ignored the fact that Americans reviled her, and they still continue to treat her like a star. So not only do you have sort of an elitist bubble of what they think the rest of America wants to see, you also have this time lag. So even if they're wrong, they're not going to catch it for like 24 months. But, that's why the internet is so vital. It is so important. And that's why people like you really matter every single day. Because you reach out to people, you educate people, you talk to people, and you're fortunate enough, and so am I, to work at a platform where we don't have anybody telling us what we can and can't do.
Well, I should thank you for that, because in all the years I've been writing for you, you've never once told me that I couldn't write a story I wanted to write. And apparently that isn't the case at most places. And, that's just a freedom. I don't think I could operate without that. And it kind of reminds me, you're talking about this lag. And I think that earlier today, Christine O'Donnell's came out she was in debt for her PAC, and it turns out she only sold, was it 3,000 books?
3,000 copies.
3,000 copies of her books. Most
of those were bought by her own PAC.
And here they were pushing her. I mean, I'm surprised that Fox didn't give her a permanent position. This is how clueless they are. It's like after Julia Roberts, they were always looking for the next Julia Roberts, but they couldn't think outside of the box. So it was every brunette that sort of looked like Julia Roberts that they would try to push, instead of looking for the qualities that made her so appealing to the American people. And they're doing the same thing with the news. Oh, well, Fox News worked. Well, let's all get on the band and do that. Let's all do Tea Party. The Tea Party's been over since 2010. It's over. It's done. It's not coming back.
Yeah, I would agree with you that the minute healthcare reform was passed, the Tea Party was dead. It did pretty much died on the spot right there, and yet the media treats it like it's some dynamic, separate political entity instead of the social conservatives of the Republican Party.
Well, that's the thing that really made me angry when I was reading about CNN, because they said, we want to get these different point of views, so we hired a conservative, we hired a Tea Party person, and we hired a Democratic political strategist. Where's your liberal? Where's the liberal in there? Where's the if a Tea Party person would be, I would make the analogy to a liberal activist. So where's our liberal activist? Where's Michael Moore's desk at CNN?
The funny thing is, they hired a conservative strategist and a Tea Partier. They're the same thing.
Exactly. They're just using different words so they can double down on the message.
Yes, they want to send a very specific message, and that message is progressive and liberal points of view aren't welcome on our network because we don't think it'll make us money. That's the message. See, I don't happen to believe, a lot of people believe there's an institutional agenda at work in a lot of the media. Except for the Murdoch-owned properties, I don't think that's the case. I've always thought they're just chasing the money. So whatever they think is going to get ratings and dollars is what they'll be. If liberalism was going to be the big popular thing, then they would all tilt to the left.
Oh, exactly. I mean, I've worked for a lot of these folks and sat down at dinner with them, and it's all a big joke to them. They don't care. They're not trying to push an ideology, except for Murdoch, as you pointed out. They're trying to make money, and they think they watch other people. Their problem is they watch other people make money this way, and then they think this is how they're going to make money, instead of looking at what's going on in the country and where's the news story. Because there's a ton of news stories right now that they could get behind and make money off of. I don't know why they think they can't make money off of liberals, but they can. There's plenty of money to be made off of liberals.
Well, yeah, like the way George Soros funds us.
Oh, right, George. The big checks that we get. Yeah.
Those checks were $0
Yeah.
So, that looks like it's about time to wrap up the first ever edition of the Jason and Sarah Show. I'm Jason.
And I'm Sarah.
We both wish you a pleasant day, a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good night, depending on when you're listening to this. Bye-bye now.